The desert was quiet that night. The sky stretched endlessly, stars glittering like cold fires against the darkness. Somewhere far from the nearest city lights, something burned across the sky, fast, silent, and strange. Most people who saw it thought it was a meteor, but it wasn't. What fell wasn't a rock. It was a machine. It came from a civilization far older and far more advanced than Earth had ever imagined. To them, traveling across galaxies was as common as flying a plane is to humans. They called themselves the Keltari, and they guarded their secrets fiercely. Among those secrets, the most protected of all, was something they called warp technology, a way to bend space and travel faster than light itself. But that night, something went wrong. One of their deep space observation probes, known as Kelthar 9, malfunctioned while studying a distant asteroid belt. It lost control, tore through a gravitational field, and was sent tumbling toward a small blue planet, the one its creators thought was still centuries away from understanding their existence. It hit the desert sands of Nevada just before dawn when the first light touched the horizon. A U.S. satellite caught the crash flare. Within minutes, a military retrieval unit was dispatched under the code name Echo Dust. To the public, it was just another meteor impact. But to the people who arrived at the site, it was something else entirely. The ground was scorched in a perfect circle, the sand fused into glass. At the center lay fragments of something metallic, dark, and faintly glowing. The retrieval team collected every piece, sealed them in temperature-controlled crates, and sent them to a research facility under tight security. No one outside a small circle of scientists knew what they had found. Inside that lab, surrounded by layers of classified access, the fragments were laid out under powerful microscopes. They didn't look like anything man-made. The surface shimmered with patterns that seemed to move when viewed from different angles. Tiny symbols and lines that pulsed faintly with a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. At first, the scientists thought it was a new kind of energy storage device, but the deeper they looked, the stranger it became. The metal wasn't any known alloy. Its atomic structure seemed to rearrange itself every few seconds. Even the most advanced scanners failed to map it completely. Still, the scientists worked day and night. Humanity's curiosity was unstoppable. They didn't know what they were holding, but they could feel it was something extraordinary. Within a few days, the team managed to recover data fragments stored within the object. The data wasn't in any language known to Earth, yet somehow the patterns had structure, mathematical symmetry that hinted at deeper meaning. That was enough to catch the attention of the world's best minds. Quantum AI systems were deployed to study the patterns. The machines began decoding what humans couldn't read, and that's when something impossible happened. The AI found repeating sequences that matched gravitational field equations, except they weren't human equations. They were perfect solutions to problems that had baffled physicists for decades. It was as if someone had left behind the complete manual for bending space-time itself. In another part of the universe, the Keltari discovered the loss of their probe. At first, they dismissed it as a minor accident. But when they detected faint data leaks from Earth's digital systems, they realized something terrible. Humans had found the probe and were already analyzing it. To the Keltari, humans were considered a young, impulsive species, brilliant but reckless, and the idea that they might uncover warp technology, something even some Keltari scientists didn't fully understand, was terrifying. They immediately classified Earth as a containment priority. Surveillance drones were sent to monitor the planet from orbit, hidden within cloaking fields. Down on Earth, however, no one had any idea they were being watched. The research team continued their work, fueled by excitement and curiosity. They began to notice something unusual in the data patterns, a kind of rhythm, almost like a signal trying to communicate. It was as if the device wanted to be understood. One evening, while running a test simulation, a researcher accidentally connected two data sequences together. The computer froze, the lights flickered, and then, suddenly, an image appeared on the monitor. It wasn't a map, but a structure. A three-dimensional model of a warp field. The entire room fell silent. What they were seeing didn't make sense. The model showed a way to fold space itself, reducing distances between stars to almost nothing. It was the very thing science fiction had dreamed of for generations. But here it was, real, visible, and mathematically sound. The news spread through the facility like wildfire. Within hours, top scientists from across the country were brought in. Some were skeptical, others were in awe, but all agreed on one thing. This discovery could change everything humanity knew about travel, physics, and even existence. They ran experiments to test the principles using small magnetic field generators. At first, nothing happened. But then, during one attempt, a small object placed inside the field simply vanished for a split second, then reappeared 2 meters away. The scientists couldn't believe their eyes. It wasn't teleportation. It was space itself bending. While the scientists celebrated their breakthrough, the Kelthari were in chaos. Their High Council convened an emergency meeting. They couldn't understand how humans had decoded their technology so fast. Even with advanced AI, the warp equations should have taken decades to interpret. How could a species that still relied on chemical rockets have solved it in days? The truth was simple. Humans didn't think like them. Kelthari scientists relied on strict logic and tradition. Humans, however, mixed logic with imagination. They weren't afraid to test impossible ideas. Where the Kelthari saw limits, humans saw challenges. That difference terrified the alien council. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the team began constructing a small prototype based on what they had learned. It wasn't meant to fly, just to prove the field could be stabilized. The chamber was lined with energy sensors and safety locks. When they powered it on, the air shimmered. A faint hum filled the room, growing louder by the second. The lights dimmed, and for an instant the walls seemed to bend inward as if space itself was folding. The hum stopped. The chamber was still. The readings confirmed it. They had created a micro-warp field. Humanity had just taken its first step toward faster-than-light travel, without even realizing the full consequences. The next day, classified communication lines buzzed between major space agencies. Questions arose: who had built this probe? Was someone watching Earth? Could this technology be weaponized? The world governments decided to keep it hidden for now. But secrecy has a limit. Energy readings from the experiments began to reach orbit, where hidden Kelthari ships detected them instantly. Panic spread among the alien watchers. They reported to their superiors. The humans have activated the fragments. They are learning. In their fear, the Kelthari decided to send a recovery team to Earth. They couldn't allow the humans to continue. They prepared a stealth craft, equipped with advanced cloaking systems, and set a course for the blue planet. Back in the desert, under the same sky where it had all begun, the research team prepared for another test. They didn't know that high above them, something was descending quietly through the atmosphere. As the night grew deeper, the desert wind picked up, whispering across the sands. The scientists worked in silence, unaware that the next few hours would change everything, not just for Earth, but for the galaxy itself. And far beyond, in the cold darkness of space, the Kelthari Council watched their screens with dread. One of their advisors whispered, "If they can decode what we hid, they might one day surpass us." But down on Earth, the humans didn't think about power or fear. They thought about discovery, about the beauty of the unknown, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they were never truly alone. The desert lights flickered once more as the machine powered up. The hum grew stronger. The air rippled. The scientists held their breath, and for a brief shining moment, space itself bent to human will. The experiment shut down safely, leaving everyone stunned. One of the senior researchers whispered softly, "We did it." No one noticed the faint streak in the sky above them, the alien ship descending quietly, invisible to human eyes. The Kelthari had come to take back what they had lost, but it was already too late. The humans had decoded their secret, and nothing in the universe would ever be the same again. The night was still when the alien ship entered Earth's atmosphere. It made no sound, no visible glow, and no sign of movement to human eyes. Wrapped in its cloaking field, it was invisible even to the best military radars. The Kelthari had arrived. Their mission was simple: recover the lost technology before humans learned too much. But deep down, the crew knew it was already too late. From orbit, they had seen the humans activate the warp field. The energy pattern was unmistakable. They hadn't just found the probe, they had understood it. Inside the ship, the Kelthari commander paced silently. His species had studied countless worlds, but never had they seen one evolve so fast. Humanity's progress was unpredictable, like a storm. One moment primitive, the next moment breaking through the limits of science. He feared that if humans mastered warp travel, no power in the galaxy could stop them. Meanwhile, on Earth, inside the underground research facility, the scientists were preparing for another experiment. The first warp bubble had lasted less than 10 seconds, but it had changed everything. The readings they captured showed clear evidence that space could be folded safely. The team was still trying to understand what that meant, but one thing was clear. This was the beginning of something huge. They had already built a larger prototype. This one wasn't just a test chamber. It was designed to move. Not far, maybe only a few meters, but it could be the first object in human history to travel using warp mechanics. As dawn broke, the desert turned golden under the rising sun. The team gathered around the control station, their faces filled with excitement and exhaustion. They had worked through the night. For a moment, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. When they powered up the generator, the air began to hum again. The same shimmering light appeared, bending everything inside the chamber. This time the device didn't vanish, it disappeared completely for several seconds. The monitors went blank. Then with a flash it reappeared on the other side of the room. The room exploded in applause. The team couldn't believe it. They had done it again, but this time the effect lasted longer. Humanity had just achieved controlled spatial displacement. The lead researcher turned to the data screen, scanning through the readings. "This is no illusion," he said softly. "We're folding space." Outside the lab, security teams monitored strange signals around the desert. Energy spikes, magnetic distortions, and radar echoes appeared out of nowhere. But they didn't know that those echoes came from the invisible alien ship, hovering silently above the research site. Inside the ship, the Kelthari crew studied human transmissions. Their scanners intercepted every radio and digital signal. They listened to scientists talking, watched humans celebrate, and observed every test. To them, this was dangerous. Humans had already reached a point that took their civilization thousands of years. The commander decided it was time to act. They couldn't allow humans to move forward. A plan was made to retrieve the fragments secretly during the next experiment. They would land under cover of night and erase every trace of alien technology before anyone noticed. But things didn't go as planned. That evening, the scientists noticed something strange. Power fluctuations, static interference, and radar pings started showing on their systems. It was as if someone or something was watching them. They assumed it was a technical glitch, but deep in their minds a quiet unease began to grow. By midnight, the desert was covered in a soft wind. The stars glimmered brightly overhead. Inside the facility, everyone was preparing for a third test. This one was riskier. They wanted to expand the warp field to 5 times its original size. It was a massive leap, but they were ready to try. As the countdown began, the alien ship lowered itself closer to the surface, still cloaked. The Kelthari team deployed small drones, transparent, silent, and capable of moving through walls like ghosts. They entered the facility through the air vents, invisible to cameras. The scientists were too focused on the experiment to notice anything unusual. The generators began to charge. The hum turned deeper. The air started vibrating, and faint waves of light rippled across the room. The warp field began to form, brighter and stronger than before. But suddenly, something unexpected happened. One of the alien drones got too close to the energy field. The warp pulse reacted instantly, pulling the drone into it. For a moment, it flickered and vanished. Then, a second later, alarms started blaring. The field began to fluctuate uncontrollably. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the air filled with static. The scientists rushed to shut it down, but the field didn't stop. It kept growing. The energy was spiraling beyond control. High above, the alien commander saw the readings spike on his display. He realized what had happened. The humans had accidentally captured one of their drones in the warp field. That meant their technology was now fully exposed. He shouted for an emergency retreat, but it was too late. Inside the lab, the warp bubble suddenly collapsed with a thunderous crack. The lights went out and everything went silent. When the emergency systems came back on, the room was covered in smoke. The scientists coughed and blinked through the haze. The chamber was empty, but on the floor lay something that had not been there before. A small metallic shard glowing faintly. One of the researchers picked it up carefully. It was not part of their equipment. It looked alien. The realization hit them all at once. Something or someone else was here. Security teams rushed in, scanning the area for intruders. The scientists quickly stored the shard in a containment unit. But the alien material was already transmitting faint signals. Within minutes, the nearby satellites picked them up, and military control centers around the world started asking questions. Why are we detecting unknown energy bursts from a research site in Nevada? One officer asked. Is someone experimenting with off-world tech? The truth was spreading faster than anyone could control. In orbit, the Kelthari ship tried to erase its tracks, but human satellites had already detected a faint trace, an invisible object moving at impossible speed. Governments across the world went on high alert, though none dared to reveal it publicly. The humans didn't know it yet, but their discovery had just changed their place in the universe. Over the next few days, scientists studied the mysterious shard. Its material was far beyond anything found on Earth. They discovered it emitted low-frequency pulses that matched the same energy signature as the crashed probe. It confirmed their fears. This was alien. The team began to decode the shard structure, and once again their AI systems detected something inside, a memory pattern. They realized it contained a digital recording. When they decrypted it, a faint holographic projection flickered to life. It showed a shape, tall and glowing, speaking in a language no one understood. But the tone was clear. It was a warning. The scientists froze as the hologram repeated the same sequence several times before vanishing. What if it's trying to tell us to stop? Someone whispered. But curiosity outweighed fear. They couldn't stop now. They had proof that intelligent life existed, and that it had visited Earth. For the first time, humans were not alone. As the world slept, the scientists continued their work, trying to translate the alien message. They noticed that some of the symbols matched the equations from the warp data. It was as if the aliens had left a lock, and humans had already found the key. But miles above the planet, the Kelthari were watching in silence. They couldn't intervene now without being detected. They realized they had lost control of the situation. Humanity had crossed a line that could never be undone. The commander finally spoke in a low, heavy tone. They have seen the truth, he said. We can't take it back. On Earth, the scientists prepared to run one final test before the government could shut them down. They wanted to prove that humans could not only create a warp bubble, but sustain it long enough to travel through it. The entire team gathered for what might be their last experiment together. The countdown began once again. The chamber glowed brighter than ever before. Energy readings shot off the scale. The warp field started to stabilize, but then something strange appeared inside it. For a brief moment, an image formed within the bubble, a glimpse of stars, strange lights and dark silhouettes moving across the void. The scientists stared in disbelief. They weren't just bending space. They were opening a window to somewhere else. The vision vanished as quickly as it appeared. The system shut itself down automatically. Silence filled the room. No one spoke for several minutes. Finally, one of them whispered, "We just saw another world." No one realized that the alien ship had captured the same visual data from orbit. The Kelthari Council would soon receive it. Confirming their worst fear, humans had not only decoded warp technology, they had used it to look beyond their own solar system. The humans didn't know it yet, but their experiment had sent a signal across the stars. Other civilizations would soon notice. The galaxy now knew that Earth was awake, and far beyond, in the endless night of space, something ancient and powerful had already begun to listen. For several days, the research facility stayed on lockdown. Soldiers guarded every gate, drones circled above, and no one was allowed to enter or leave. The government had taken full control of the project now. The discovery was too big, too dangerous, and too unpredictable to be left in the hands of civilians. Inside, the scientists were frustrated but also proud. They had done something no one in human history had achieved. They had touched the edge of the universe itself. But now they felt like prisoners inside their own lab. The small alien shard they had found during the failed experiment was locked in a reinforced vault. Only a few people had access to it. Every hour, data was being transmitted from that shard, sending strange coded pulses through their systems. The energy coming from it wasn't harmful, but it was strange. It seemed to react to human presence. almost as if it was aware of being watched. No one could explain it. Then one morning, something new happened. The lights in the laboratory began to flicker again. The computers started turning on by themselves. The shard inside the containment box glowed faintly, and for a brief moment it emitted a pulse strong enough to overload the system. The screens filled with lines of alien symbols that appeared for only a few seconds before vanishing. It was as if it had spoken, but in a language still too far from human understanding. The scientists worked day and night trying to decode it, but the AI systems kept giving different results each time. No translation stayed consistent. It was like the message was alive, shifting every moment. While all this was happening thousands of miles above Earth, the Kelthari ship remained in silent orbit. The commander received daily reports from the monitoring drones. Humans were moving too fast, learning too much. It was no longer about one experiment. They had begun to understand the very essence of warp geometry. In his report to the High Council, he said something that no Kelthari had ever dared to say before. The humans are not imitating us. They are innovating. That statement sent shockwaves through the Kelthari leadership. They had always believed that progress followed a pattern, that knowledge took time and generations. But humans had compressed what should have taken centuries into days. It didn't make sense, and that's what frightened them the most. The council debated endlessly. Some argued they should open communication and guide the humans before things got out of control. Others demanded immediate containment before this. Young species discovered things that could destabilize the galaxy. The final decision was, cautious but firm, they would wait and watch. For one more planetary cycle, if humans attempted a large-scale warp experiment, the Kelthari would intervene directly. Back on Earth, the team didn't know they were being observed. The lead scientist kept pushing for more tests despite the government's orders to stop. "We can't walk away from this," he said during a private meeting. "We've opened a door. We can't just close it now," the others agreed. So they began to work in secret. Late at night, after official hours, a small group stayed behind, running simulations and analyzing data hidden from the main network. They made a shocking discovery. The strange energy pattern from the shard wasn't random. It matched the same field generated during their warp tests. It was like the shard was responding to their experiments, as if it could sense when the warp energy was active. That night, they decided to try something bold. They connected the shard directly to the warp generator using insulated conduits. The moment the connection was made, the lights dimmed, and a deep vibration ran through the floor. The shard began to pulse rapidly, and for a few seconds, everything around it turned weightless. Tools floated into the air. The air shimmered. Then, in the middle of the room, a small sphere of light appeared, transparent but alive. It grew slowly, humming softly like a living thing. Everyone froze. The readings on their monitors showed impossible numbers. Gravitational distortion, electromagnetic surges, and quantum spikes all at once. One of the researchers whispered, "It's reacting to us." No one dared to move. They just watched as the sphere of light expanded slightly, then suddenly projected a faint image like a hologram, but more fluid. Far above the blue planet, hidden behind a field of bending light, the Kelthari Council ship hung silently in orbit. Inside, the air was thick with tension. No one spoke for several minutes. The shimmering display in the center of the command hall replayed the footage again and again. The human warp experiment. The shimmering space window and the stars that weren't from their own galaxy. The council leader finally broke the silence. His voice was calm, but there was fear beneath every word. "They've crossed the threshold. The humans have touched the fold." Another member turned sharply. "It was only a matter of time. We should have erased them when the probe crashed." The room fell quiet again. The truth was hard to deny. The humans had done in a few months what took the Kelthari hundreds of years. And now, there was no stopping them. Far below, on Earth, the scientists were still trying to make sense of what they had seen. The experiment had ended abruptly, but those few seconds changed everything. They had seen beyond Earth's sky, beyond the known universe. The team couldn't explain it yet, but they knew it wasn't just a malfunction. It was a door, a glimpse into something much greater. The government moved quickly to contain the situation. Military trucks surrounded the research base and communication lines were shut down. The project was labeled Top Secret Cosmic Initiative. Only a handful of people were allowed to continue working. But inside that facility, something had already shifted. The scientists had captured every reading, every pulse of energy, every frame of the strange vision that appeared in the warp bubble. They couldn't stop now. Their curiosity burned too deeply. A few of them gathered in a quiet corner of the lab, reviewing the data in secret. The energy pattern that appeared during the experiment wasn't random. It followed a rhythm like a coded signal. It was as if something had responded from the other side of the warp field. Maybe we weren't the only ones looking through that window, one of them said softly. No one replied, but everyone in the room felt the same chill. Meanwhile, the Keltari Council argued endlessly. Some believed humans should be wiped out before they spread their influence across the stars. Others saw an opportunity. If they could decode our warp field, one advisor said, perhaps they could also fix what we failed to understand. They might even become useful. The council leader thought about it for a long moment. The Keltari were old, wise, and powerful, but their civilization had grown tired. Their discoveries had slowed. Their curiosity had faded. Humans, on the other hand, were reckless but alive. They had the same fire the Keltari had once possessed thousands of years ago. We cannot destroy them, the leader said at last. We'll watch them, and when the time is right, we'll speak to them. Down on Earth, strange events began to happen near the research base. Locals reported hearing deep humming sounds at night. Some said they saw faint lights moving silently across the sky. The military denied everything, but inside the facility, the scientists knew the truth. Someone was watching them. Late one night, while most of the team had gone home, one of the researchers stayed behind to run a few more tests. He connected the data from the last experiment into a new simulation, trying to rebuild the energy sequence that created the warp window. As the computer processed the data, the air in the lab began to shift. The lights flickered. The air grew heavy and static electricity filled the room. The screens flashed bright white for a few seconds before going dark. And then, just for a heartbeat, something appeared in front of him. A figure made of pure light, tall and silent. It looked almost human, but not quite. Before he could move, the figure faded into nothingness. The simulation stopped. The room went silent. The researcher stared at the empty space where the figure had stood. His hands trembled. He wasn't sure if he had seen a hallucination or a message. But one thing was certain. Whatever had appeared, it had come through the warp field. The next morning, he reported the incident to the others. They didn't believe him at first. But when they checked the lab's surveillance footage, the same white flash appeared on camera, and for a brief moment, a faint outline of the glowing shape could be seen. The team realized something bigger was happening. The warp window hadn't just shown them another world. It had connected them to something intelligent. Something waiting on the other side. Word reached the top levels of government. Some wanted to destroy the project immediately, fearing it could attract danger. Others insisted they continue, arguing that humanity had already gone too far to turn back. The decision was made. One final controlled experiment. They would recreate the warp window and try to record everything clearly this time. The test was scheduled for the next night. As preparations began, the hidden Kelthari ship received the signal. Their sensors detected the human energy buildup again. The commander clenched his hands. They're doing it again, he said quietly. They're about to open the fold. The council ordered him not to interfere. Observe only, they commanded. We must see what they awaken. That night, the desert was silent once more. Inside the underground lab, every system glowed softly. The countdown started. The hum of power grew louder and deeper. The scientists watched the readings climb higher and higher. Then the light appeared. The warp bubble formed in the center of the chamber, bright, perfect, and pulsing like a living thing. The air rippled around it. The sound grew low and heavy, almost like a heartbeat. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the same image appeared again. Stars, glowing clouds, and dark shapes drifting in the distance. But this time it didn't vanish. The image stabilized. The scientists leaned forward, staring in awe. On the other side of the portal, they could see structures, massive, shining like silver cities floating in the dark. And then, slowly, something began to move closer. It was not a ship. It was something alive. A being made of light taller than any human with long arms and a calm, steady glow. It didn't speak, but its presence filled the room with an emotion the scientists couldn't describe. Something between peace and fear. Every monitor recorded the encounter. The being raised its hand slowly, and the warp field shimmered in response. One of the scientists whispered, "It's trying to communicate." The being formed shapes in the air, symbols, patterns, and waves of light that matched the mathematical language in the original alien probe. The scientists watched in disbelief as their computer began translating the signals automatically. Words appeared on the screen. "We did not mean to be found," the team froze. The being continued forming more symbols. "You have seen what was hidden. What you do next will shape your future." And then, the light began to fade. The warp field collapsed gently, leaving behind only silence and a faint hum. The scientists stood motionless. No one spoke for a long time. They had just received a direct message from something not of this world. Later that night, military vehicles surrounded the base again. Every recording was seized. The team was told not to speak to anyone. The official report claimed the test had failed. But the people who had been there knew the truth. They had made contact. In orbit, the Kelthari ship analyzed the human transmission. They saw the same glowing figure, the same message. One of the officers looked shocked. "That was not one of us," he said. The commander's expression darkened. "Then who was it?" The data showed the light being came from beyond even the Kelthari's known sectors, an ancient presence perhaps older than their civilization itself. The realization sent chills through them all. The humans had opened a doorway not only to alien knowledge but to something ancient and powerful. Down on Earth, the scientists who witnessed the event couldn't sleep. Their minds were filled with wonder and fear. Some believed the message was a warning. Others thought it was an invitation, but one thing was clear. They were no longer just observers of the universe. They had become part of something much larger. As dawn broke, the desert was quiet once again. The world above continued as if nothing had happened. But deep underground, a handful of humans knew that the first real contact had already taken place. Not through radio waves or telescopes, but through a technology no one was meant to understand. And somewhere far beyond the stars, unseen by both humans and Kelthari, other eyes had begun to turn toward Earth. The humans had crossed into a realm of knowledge once thought forbidden. The Kelthari couldn't hide their secrets anymore. The universe had taken notice, and for humanity, this was only the beginning. The next few days passed in a strange kind of tension. The alien engineers, who had once been so confident, almost proud, were now quiet. They stayed mostly in their quarters, whispering to each other in their soft, echoing language. The humans, on the other hand, had become more curious, their scientists moving around the ship with renewed focus. It wasn't just about studying anymore. It was about understanding something that had never happened before. Humans cracking a technology that wasn't even supposed to be possible for them to understand. Late one night, while the ship floated silently above the dark side of Earth, a quiet meeting took place in one of the research rooms. The light was dim and the air was thick with uncertainty. One of the senior human scientists, an older man with tired eyes, stood near a holographic display showing a glowing image of the warp drive's core. Around him were a few young engineers, their faces pale from working without rest. "I think we've done it," one of them said softly. "We've mapped how their space folds. It's not just about speed. It's about bending the very direction of reality." The older man looked at him carefully. "You mean, we can recreate it?" The engineer nodded slowly. "Yes, but it's dangerous. If we make one small mistake, it could tear space apart. The energy inside that core, it's like holding a star in your hand." There was silence for a long moment. The hum of the ship's systems filled the air. Then the older scientist sighed. "We can't rush it. If we do this wrong, we'll destroy everything." But unknown to them, two alien technicians had been listening from outside the room. They exchanged worried glances, their skin shimmering faintly in the light. For them, this wasn't just about technology. It was about trust. The warp drive wasn't simply a machine. It was a secret that represented centuries of progress and countless lives lost to perfect it. The fact that humans could decode it in days made them feel exposed, almost powerless. That night, the alien commander called an emergency meeting. His voice was low but filled with worry. "They were not supposed to understand," he said. "Our systems were encrypted beyond their mathematics. Yet they've done it. Do you realize what this means? They have surpassed every limit we expected." One of his officers leaned forward. "Maybe this is what makes them dangerous, or maybe this is what makes them special." The commander stared at him for a long moment before responding. Special or dangerous, it changes everything. If they can build a warp drive, they won't need us anymore. They'll go further than we did and faster. The officer hesitated. Should we stop them? The commander didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the large window at the earth below. No, if we stop them, they'll think we fear them. And if they sense fear, they'll never trust us again. Let's watch. Let's see how far they go. Days later, a new test began. In one of Earth's secret labs, the humans had created a smaller version of the warp device, something compact enough to fit in a metal chamber. Scientists and engineers surrounded it, their eyes glued to the readings on their screens. The hum of machinery echoed through the hall. Everyone held their breath as the core began to glow, shifting colors from blue to white. Power levels stable, someone called out. Space-time distortion forming. Another voice said, shaky but excited. Then suddenly the lights flickered. The room shook. A wave of invisible force rippled through the air, pushing papers and tools to the floor. Monitors flashed red. One of the engineers shouted, "Shut it down. It's pulling too much energy." The older scientist rushed to the controls, his hands flying across the console. But before he could reach the final switch, a bright pulse of light burst from the chamber. It wasn't an explosion. It was something stranger, something beyond understanding. For a brief second, everyone saw shapes and patterns that didn't belong to their world. Then it was gone. When the light faded, silence filled the room. The machine was still glowing faintly, unharmed. The readings showed something impossible. A brief fold in space like a heartbeat of another universe. The humans had done it. They had created a controlled warp fold. The scientists looked at each other, unable to speak. For them, this was more than a discovery. It was proof that human minds could not just follow alien knowledge, they could expand it. When the alien commander received the news, he stood frozen for a long time. His second-in-command spoke carefully. They succeeded, didn't they? The commander nodded slowly. Yes, they not only understood our design, they improved it. There was quiet disbelief among his team. The aliens had always believed humans were still at the beginning of their cosmic journey. Brilliant, but primitive. Now that belief was shattered. Later that night, the alien commander visited the human base. He met the older scientist who was standing near the small warp core, still glowing gently. The commander's expression was unreadable. "You've done something incredible," he said finally. The scientist looked up, tired but proud. "We only followed the trail you left. Your design showed us the path." The commander smiled faintly. "No, you went beyond it. You saw what even we couldn't see." There was a pause. Both men, one from Earth, one from the stars, stood in silence, realizing what this moment meant. For the first time, two civilizations had crossed paths not as master and student but as equals. Outside, the sky above the base shimmered faintly as the small warp pulse echoed one last time. It left behind a trace of light, like a thin scar on the edge of space. But while most celebrated the success, a few people worried. One of the engineers whispered to a colleague, "What if this changes everything? What if this discovery starts something we can't control?" The other engineer looked at him, his expression uneasy. "It already has." Far above them, in the dark void between planets, hidden satellites belonging to other powers were already tracking the warp pulse. They had seen the flash, recorded the data, and sent it back to their stations. The secret was no longer secret. Humanity's discovery was now known by many. Back on the alien ship, the commander sat alone, watching a projection of the Earth turning below. His thoughts were heavy. He knew what came next: ambition, competition, and the hunger for more. He whispered softly to himself, "We hid our warp tech to protect the stars, but maybe humans were meant to find it." That night, the stars above Earth seemed a little brighter. No one knew it yet, but history had already changed. Humanity had taken its first real step into the unknown, armed not just with technology, but with the courage to understand what others had feared to share. And somewhere deep in the ship, the old human scientist recorded his final words in a log. "We didn't steal their power. We simply listened to what the universe was already trying to tell us." The moment we understood it, space itself seemed to open its eyes. He looked out of the window, watching the vast, silent sea of stars. "This isn't the end," he said softly. "This is only the beginning." And with that, Earth's new journey among the stars quietly began, not with a war, not with conquest, but with understanding. Yet even as they celebrated, a quiet feeling lingered among a few. They all knew that once humanity took this step, there was no turning back. The universe had noticed, and it was waiting. The world had changed, though most people on Earth didn't know it yet. Only a few governments and a small group of scientists were aware of what had happened, that humans had unlocked the secret of warp travel. The experiment that had started as a quiet test had now turned into something that could reshape the future of humanity forever. In one of the secret bases buried deep under a mountain, a group of scientists gathered again. The air in the room felt heavy, filled with excitement and nervous energy. On the large screen in front of them, the data from the last warp pulse replayed in slow motion. The readings showed something that no one could have imagined, a ripple that went beyond their solar system, a signal that traveled faster than light, touching corners of space they couldn't even see. One of the scientists, a calm woman who had spent her whole life studying physics, leaned forward. "The pulse didn't just stay here," she said softly. "It spread. It reached out like the universe was answering us back." Another scientist frowned. "You mean someone might have received it?" She nodded slowly. "Not someone, something, somewhere out there." Her words left the room silent. Everyone understood what it meant. If humans had cracked warp technology, and that pulse had traveled beyond the stars, then someone or something might have noticed. The universe had just become aware of humanity's step forward. Far above Earth, the alien ship remained in orbit, watching quietly. Inside, the alien commander stood near the observation deck, looking down at the glowing planet below. His expression was calm, but his mind was full of questions. One of his officers approached. "They've stabilized the warp core," the officer said. "Their understanding has grown faster than expected. What do we do now?" The commander didn't answer right away. "We observe. This is their moment now. They've earned it. But if they continue," the officer said carefully, "others will come. You know how the galaxy reacts when a new race becomes warp-capable?" The commander sighed softly. "Yes, that's what worries me. They've entered the stage too soon. The universe can be cruel to the curious." Meanwhile, back on Earth, the human team continued to work. They had built a new prototype, something larger, something powerful enough to take a small ship beyond the solar system for the very first time. The project was named Dawnlight. When the ship was finally ready, it stood in a massive underground hangar, surrounded by scientists, engineers, and soldiers. It looked sleek, silver, and alive, powered by the same warp core that had once belonged to the aliens but now redesigned in a human way. The scientists didn't just copy what they saw, they improved it, made it more efficient, more adaptable. As the final checks were completed, the older scientist who had led the project stood before the team. His face was lined with exhaustion but brightened with pride. "We started as explorers," he said, "but today we become something more. We've learned that the universe doesn't give its secrets easily, but when it does, it expects us to handle them with care. Let's not forget that." Everyone nodded quietly. They knew the risks. A single mistake could mean disaster, but this was worth it. Humanity's future depended on taking this step. As countdown began, the control room filled with tense silence. The Dawnlight's engines hummed softly, the warp core glowing brighter than ever. The scientist's heart pounded in his chest as the voice over the intercom began to count down. 5,
4, 3,
2, 1. The air shimmered. The ship disappeared. For a moment, there was nothing. No light, no sound, just an empty space where the ship had been. The screens in the control room flickered, showing static. Then suddenly, data began pouring in. It worked. Someone shouted. "They're gone. They've entered the fold." Everyone cheered, but the older scientist just stood still, staring at the monitor. He whispered, "Now let's see if they can come back." In a small chamber somewhere in the depths of folded space, the dawnlight floated through something that didn't look like the universe humans knew. The stars looked stretched like lines of silver and gold. Time felt different, thicker, heavier. The crew watched in awe as the ship passed through waves of light that pulsed like breathing. "Are we still in space?" one of them asked softly. The pilot smiled faintly. "I don't know what this is, but it's beautiful." After a few moments, they reactivated the navigation system, which began tracking their position. When the readings finally stabilized, the crew gasped. They were no longer near Earth. They were orbiting a new star system. one that no human had ever seen before. It was a quiet system, with 3 planets circling a golden sun. One of the planets had oceans, clouds, and land that glimmered under the light. It looked alive. The crew recorded every detail, sending the data back through a special signal toward Earth. But as they prepared to return, something unexpected happened. Their communication systems began to pick up a strange signal, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The pilot frowned. "That's not from us." The crew looked at each other in confusion. The signal grew stronger, repeating in patterns. "It wasn't random. It was organized, intelligent. Is it them?" Someone whispered. "The ones who noticed our pulse?" They didn't have time to find out. A bright light appeared in front of their ship, a shimmer like a curtain opening. And from that light, a new ship emerged. It wasn't human, but it also didn't match the design of the aliens who had hidden the warp tech. This was something else, sleek, dark, silent. The crew froze. For a long moment, neither side moved. Then a voice came through their system, deep and calm, speaking in a language that somehow made sense to their minds. "You have crossed the boundary of silence," the voice said. "You are not the first to find the path, but you are the youngest." The crew stared in disbelief. The pilot spoke, trembling slightly. "Who are you?" The voice replied, "We are the Watchers. We guard the flow between stars. Your kind was not expected yet." Back on Earth, the control room was alive with noise. The readings from dawnlight were showing strange fluctuations. The scientist leaned forward, his voice urgent. "They're not alone out there. Something's found them." He quickly sent a message through the emergency channel, his voice shaking but clear. "Dawnlight, if you can hear me, return immediately. Activate warp sequence. Do not engage." In deep space, the pilot heard the order. He took a deep breath and pressed the controls. The warp core flared to life, humming louder than ever. The light outside began to twist again, pulling them back toward home. But before the ship vanished, the mysterious voice spoke one last time. "Your world has awakened. The stars will now watch you closely. Use your gift wisely, or you will lose it." And then, the dawnlight was gone, swallowed by the warp. Seconds later, it reappeared above Earth, trembling from the journey. The control room erupted in cheers, relief washing over everyone. The older scientist covered his face with his hands, tears forming in his eyes. "They made it," he whispered. They actually made it. But deep down, he knew something had changed. The message they received wasn't just a warning. It was a reminder. The universe was aware of humanity now, and there was no going back to silence. That night, he stood alone on the balcony of the base, looking up at the stars. The sky seemed different, alive. He remembered the words of the alien commander who had once said, "If humans ever decode our warp, the stars will take notice." Now, that moment had arrived. Humanity had stepped into the vast stage of the universe, not as guests, not as students, but as participants. The question was no longer, can we go further? It was, should we? As he gazed at the sky, the scientist smiled softly. "We didn't just find their technology," he murmured. "We found our place." The stars twinkled in silence as if listening. Somewhere out there, other beings watched Earth with curiosity. They knew the humans had arrived early, but they also knew this was only the beginning. Because once a door to the stars opens, it never truly closes again. And thus, humanity's story among the stars began, not written in fear or war, but in courage, curiosity, and the quiet belief that even the smallest world could reach infinity, as long as it dared to dream.